Hello, and welcome back to the Audible Waters podcast. I am your host, Ralph Jesperson. I said the sinner's prayer at the age of 5, but only got serious about my personal relationship with Jesus Christ at 16. I want to share a brief story about that before we review the evidence about GFA being a big lie that raised over $1 billion over the decades. I came into this world with a severe mental health disorder called selective mutism disorder. It is very rare from what I have learned and is a paranoia that causes a child to be absolutely silent at all times around most people. It is a social disorder that made me very depressed as a child. I was hospitalized for 7 weeks at the age of 12. This disorder led me to a place where I had constant suicidal ideations at the age of 15. But on my 16th birthday, God gave me the best birthday present of my life. It came in a simple thought. You have not been taking your faith seriously. Give it a try. Give me a try. Taste and see that the Lord is good and a very present help in the time of need. I did that, becoming as serious about my personal relationship with God as I could. I changed what I was doing and how to an extreme. It took years, but I kept getting better over time. In college, I stabilized completely and the depression was gone. I wrote a book, a lease seller, on Amazon in the hopes it might encourage at least one person to do the same. I share that because if God did not help me, I would not be talking with you right now. It is a miracle, and God deserves all the glory for that. As I said last time, back in March of 2015, I am the former Gospel for Asia donor who first contacted Professor Warren Throckmorton after becoming aware of certain insider news that suggested to me that GFA was a scam, a very big scam. But in order to make what I have to say clearer in these videos, I'm going to be using a voice other than my own as I sometimes stumble over my words. And so here is the meat of episode 2.
The topics for today from Warren's blog posts of 10 years ago include the rubber plantation that GFA bought with donor money when none was raised to buy such a thing, and a for-profit hospital that was built in the same fashion, an American audit, and Indian reports that do not match, the FC6 reporting website that GFA hid from donors for obvious reasons. GFA begins to report financial information for first time on the ECFA website, millions that were not sent to the field in a timely fashion. But first, a post proving that the smurfing they did with naive volunteers is a crime in the US. Last time, I explained at length what smurfing money laundering actually is. In this blog post, Warren quoted a section on the GFA website stating that there are also systems in place to comply with legal requirements of the countries where we send funds to. Some of those systems include transferring funds only through approved banking channels. But cash being brought in envelopes and not ever declared do not meet that criteria. Warren contacted the U.S. Customs and Border Protection Agency by email and described what was done with the discipleship students all bringing in cash that was not their own. They responded by stating that to legally do this they must file a report with the U.S. Customs and Border Protection Agency. Structuring, including smurfing, is a violation of 31 U.S.C. 5324. And so the federal government has spoken the final word on this. This was an act of organized crime and clear deception, taking advantage of the naivete of travelers going to India. Then, there was this blog post. In a staff meeting on May 14, 2015, Gospel for Asia leaders told staff that they had $7 million in cash balances in India. Professor Warren said, "This puzzled me because it seems to contradict the financial contribution reports filed with the Indian government every year. Something isn't adding up when one compares David Carroll's information to what is filed with the Indian government." According to the most recent report showing GFA's use of foreign contributions for the Indian fiscal year ending March 31, 2014, GFA alone had just under $55 million listed as a cash balance. If you include the other entities that receive money from U.S.-based GFA-controlled limited liability corporations, the balance swells to over $158 million. Warren then shows a chart of where these listed amounts come from in a report he got from the Indian government called the Foreign Contributions Portal. So either GFA was lying to their staff or they were lying to the Indian government when they reported the much higher balances, or even possibly both were lies. Then he posted a report listing how money was spent according to the Indian FC6 report. GFA was claiming that their overseas books were closed because of persecution, and they had to be kept secret. This was a lie, though, as all along they had to report numbers to their own government, and these numbers were available to the public in India. Warren managed to get his hands on the latest report available and posted it on this blog post. Warren stated, "According to GFA's financial statement ending in 2013, India receives 96% of the contributions from the U.S. He showed where you can go to look up this info yourself on the internet. The biggest revelation on this post was what the most money was being spent on. A for-profit hospital that was being built that was never mentioned anywhere in the U.S. It just appeared out of nowhere. 27% of the 2014 budget was spent on that. Another 15% of the expenses were on places of worship, which also did not make sense as their fundraising they did for what they claimed were small, rural church buildings to be built was a very small part of what they were doing. These were both higher than the category which would have included the support of all of those supposed native missionaries. This was their biggest focus since the beginning. With this, it started to look like this was their gravy train, and so many people were supporting native missionaries that the supply of money outstripped probably by many times the supply of available qualified people willing to do this. They just kept building up larger excesses of cash until they decided what to do with it. Spending it in this way is technically not legal in either the US and India. But again, the trick is getting governments to enforce their own charity-related laws. In India, the bribes keep this from getting enforced maybe ever? Someone running a small ministry in India soon showed up in the comment section of these blog posts. They had interesting things to say. One was that they traveled all over India as part of what they were doing, and they could not find a single GFA native missionary. It was clear from the math that there should have been tens of thousands of them from the numbers being donated for that purpose. But they never met one. They also explained that the hospital was advertised there as a place for tourists to come and get procedures done for a fraction of the cost it would cost in the US for the same. It was not being built for the poor or as some kind of charity help there in India. It was 100% for profit. The next post to look at today is about the Indian news report concerning a rubber plantation that GFA bought that, again, was never mentioned in the West, and no money was ever raised for the purchase of this other for-profit business. Warren reported two very different prices as being paid for this property, either of which could be verified, so for how much I do not know. The news report claimed that they lost the plantation, for it appears that the company they had bought it from were only leasing the land. They had falsified a deed and had effectively scammed the scammers. This news report later turned out to be inaccurate. The government has kept dragging GFA into court over and over again. Periodically, news reports kept coming out saying that the government had won, only to be followed by reports that GFA had finally won in court. I recently found another article from this year continuing in the ping-pong back and forth. It appears that the government cannot win because of the bribes of GFA, money we in the West keep giving them. And the judges have no reason to ever put this to bed, as that would mean the bribes would have to stop at that point. There is more that happens later with that land that this will eventually get to. I can just imagine how KP Yohanan would try to spin everything that I have reported on in this episode. The persecution of our army of native missionaries has gotten so bad that we had to build a hospital for them to be treated. There are just so many of them. And we cannot trust them damned Hindus to treat them someplace that they control. Oh, the horror of all of the severe injuries. And we needed to buy the rubber plantation to help with this too. We really need that raw rubber at good prices. What? Why do we need that, and what does it have to do with treating their wounds? Is not that obvious? I cannot tell you because the government is persecuting us. Never mind while I brashly change the subject. I am winning the whole country to Jesus here. Keep giving me more mammon. There is no such things as too much. I got to go bribe a judge, or was it a police chief? Did I just say that? Never mind. The stress of all of this is getting to me. Satan is attacking my ministry with all of these questions. But back to the next thing to cover from this blog. Professor Throckmorton compared numbers reported sent to the field from U.S. sources with numbers reported received in India from Indian sources. The numbers were off by a huge amount. Some $21 million or 36% of the total went missing. He tried looking at things a number of different ways, but nothing could explain the difference. The numbers from the U.S. came from an audited statement, supposedly checked by the Evangelical Council for Finance Accountability, or ECFA for short. Those stated that $58 million was sent the prior year to India, but the Indian statement only acknowledged the receipt of some $6 million. An important paragraph here states, thus, at least two problems emerge for GFA's credibility. 1. GFA claimed in the audited financial statement that it only contributed to 5 related nonprofit organizations. However, GFA in the U.S. uses 12 LLCs to send money to at least 3 additional registered charities in India: Believers Church, Love India Ministries and Last Hour Ministries, which are not disclosed in the audited financial statement. 2. The amounts GFA says they send to GFA in India comes nowhere close to matching what GFA, India reports to the Indian government. Warren asked GFA for answers as to what was going on with all of this, but by this time they stopped answering questions, as each answer would only bring up more rational questions. This post was followed by one showing that GFA, for the first time, actually reported its U.S. financial information on the ECFA website. Before this, KP was claiming persecution as the reason there was no information there when most everyone else on the website had this information listed. This change must have come from these other things I just mentioned being disclosed, and it had to be done from an outside source that was asking hard questions. GFA was a charter member, which meant that they had joined in the first year of the existence of this ECFA business. But at this point, this is a good time to go into the history of the ECFA and my experience with it. This business was created right after a powerful Washington politician started to make some noise about the wealthiest televangelists. He was expressing concerns that some of these people were abusing the system that allowed them to do what they do tax-free. At the time, most of these televangelists were not disclosing any financial information at all, nor were they getting audited unlike for-profit businesses. So they put their heads together in order to create something that might replace the obvious need for legislation to take away their gravy trains. The ECFA was their answer. They would get audited each year, and this outside organization would put a rubber stamp proclaiming that things were legal and out in the open. And so this business was created in order to make things look better than it really is. God allowed me to do some accounting work for an international Christian nonprofit once. They were a member of ECFA. And I got to see how one audit was done. I could not have been less impressed by what I saw. For instance, they asked me to pull 10 receipts out of the files for purchases which the charity did. 10 out of the hundreds or thousands that they had for the prior year. All that accomplished was to prove that we actually had some kind of accounting in the office. No proof required that any of those were not fraudulent. A tiny handful of all that were there. Fraudulent charities can and do create fake invoices to hide money going to fake companies for services that were never rendered or things that were never received. I saw enough to make it obvious that all the ECFA logo does for a Christian nonprofit is prove that some kind of accounting does go on inside of it. It could be of simply awful quality, but at least they are attempting to do a little of it. In the case of GFA, it was obvious that they never bothered to check all of the international wires and to total them up to see if the money that the auditors claimed were sent overseas actually were, and to the places that they claimed to. That kind of audit would cost a whole lot more than what the ECFA charged, and as I was in the accounting department of a different charity, I did see the bill afterwards. Do not donate to any Christian charity just because you saw the ECFA logo. At this point in time, I see this logo actually for the opposite, as a red flag that you would be unwise to donate there. It is worthless. And beyond that, it just costs the charity a small amount of money and proves nothing to anyone. It is deceptive by its very nature. The next post was to point people to the GFA Diaspora website that just went public. It was blocked from the public for the first 5 weeks of this exposure. I criticized them at the time for this, and I criticized them in my first video I made about this subject. This is an example of the misapplication of Matthew 18 verses 15 to 17. Those verses gets abused by all of these slimy conmen. Those verses applies to conflict happening within a church between its members. It does not apply to organizations that are technically organized crime. It does not apply to questions of heresies being taught somewhere. It does not apply to criminal activity of any kind. If you see evidence of a crime within any Christian organization, go to the police, not the CEO or the head pastor. These verses about how to handle conflict are abused by those narcissistic jerks to try to silence those who are being abused. It is pure evil. Such as do this are destined for hell, for Jesus did say to judge them by, not what they say, but what they actually do. Jesus' actual disciples do not intentionally abuse people. Continuing with the financial irregularities that Warren uncovered is this next post asking what happened to the $15 million GFA raised in Canada for the year of 2013 that was claimed to be sent to India. He goes into the particulars of Canadian law concerning what charities can and cannot do with the funds that they raise. It describes what a conduit is according to their law and wonders if what happened to the money was that it went to a conduit which is illegal. This would reference the multiple limited liability companies that KP set up. There was never an explanation given by GFA of what the other three of these registered charities actual were that were not directly tied to Gospel for Asia. It also describes what a non-qualified donee is and states that no more than 5% of the total can go to such a donee. Warren got a confusing response from CPA David Carroll about this, which is probably a lie. No surprise there. As I mentioned in the last video, a lawyer in a Canadian courtroom claimed that some $20 million of Canadian funds was sent to the U.S. headquarters in order to pay for the purchase of the land for their complex there and build all of the buildings and put in the roads and utilities. Is this 2013 money a part of that? I do not know. But from the little I understand of U.S. and Canadian law, what was done is not legal. And the 2013 Indian report did not show any money being transferred in from Canada, which raised the question in the first place. Then there's a post about KP Yohannan being scheduled to speak at a Calvary Chapel Missions Conference in California. This was posted up some 8 weeks after the first post went up. Warren wrote to the men who were organizing the conference, asking them why they were still having him speak even after all of what had come out was reportedly affecting the denomination in negative ways. He never got an answer back from them. A couple of weeks later, Warren added another Calvary Chapel-related post where KP's son was running a table with literature inside of a Calvary Chapel pastors' conference. This was not the same conference that I just mentioned. Warren noted in that post that it was back on May 8th, not that many days after it started, that the GFA US office told him to take a hike for they were not going to be answering any more questions. And finally for today, why doesn't GFA report all related party transactions? I will let Warren summarize this himself with quotes directly from the article. The only audited financial statement Gospel for Asia makes available is from 2012 and 2013. In that statement, Note H reports related party transactions. Generally, organizations are expected to disclose transactions with other groups where there are common board members or other common elements. In Note H, GFA reports contributions of cash to 5 related parties, all GFA affiliates in Asia. However, GFA failed to report other related party transactions to Believers Church, Love India Ministry, and Last Hour Ministries. Believers Church, Love India Ministry, and Last Hour Ministries are related parties. So why were donations to those organizations not reported? All are controlled by KP Yohannan, which makes these resources under his control in India. The practical matter is that donors' dollars intended for GFA may be paying the salaries of bishops and clergy within Believers Church, or ordination services such as the one where those ordained were expected to kiss the ring of KP Yohannan. Some dollars indeed going to GFA affiliates in Asian nations, but other dollars are going to a denomination with KP Yohannan as metropolitan with all the administrative, personnel, and other costs associated with it. Another practical matter is the millions of dollars which GFA claims were sent to GFA, India, but don't show up on Indian reports. Warren then asks questions about why the auditor, Bland Garvey, failed to report the related party transactions. The likely real answer to that is that these men walk in darkness and not the light. Donors would not give for these other things, so money was raised for something else, and then illegally moved elsewhere. And now for a preview of the next episode with more evidence of criminal activities to cover. Gospel for Asia retains a lawyer concerning their smurfing activities. GFA gives non-answer to question about massive cash reserves in India. Phoenix Preacher blog raises red flags over GFA. Will the Evangelical Council for Financial Unaccountability hold Gospel for Asia accountable? 2 posts regarding Francis Chan, NAR celebrity superstar, and GFA board member who credits KP Yohanan as being his mentor. An auditor raises questions about GFA's promises, spending, and unaccounted for donations, and more questions for GFA about 2013 spending and funds unaccounted for.
Okay, that is it for now. And so thanks for watching this whole second episode. May God bless you and keep you, and may you grow as wise as a serpent, just as the scriptures implore us to. I have always had a passion for what is real inside Christianity, as so much of what is marketed to us for our money is simply not. The Bereans were praised for not just believing everything someone claiming to be a Christian minister says, but actually carefully researching it. And Jesus warned us to be skeptical around those claiming to be teachers or prophets. Many times they turn out to just be prophets with an F, angling for our wallets and willing to scratch our itching ears with lies and half-truths.